effort has been more central to that than the quest to provide all students with a quality education. I'm vividly reminded of a board meeting we had in the mid-1980s. Yeah, I've been around that long. Annette Polly Williams came to the board and she made a presentation. And in that presentation, she described, in her view, the intolerable busing that was going on to move Black students all over the city without improving the quality of their education. She went on to introduce legislation and pass legislation that created a pilot program for 1,500 students in the city to take public funding to go to a non-religious private school. Since that time, MMAC has always been at the forefront of advocating for parent choice. But the effort to expand this landmark legislation involved a politically charged atmosphere. But through that, as we look at it today, the funding of these students is embedded in Wisconsin statute, it's been affirmed by the Supreme Court, and it's supported by a majority of voters. So parents today in the city of Milwaukee are sending 50,000 of their children to private and independent public charter schools that best meet the needs of their children. The association's advocacy presents an enduring commitment to the prospect of Milwaukee and its citizens. I'm going to pause here for a second because I'm in a moment going to bring up 3 board members. We're going to have a little discussion about why the business community is so involved in K-12 education. But before I do that, somewhere in the audience is a mentor of mine for the past 35 or 40 years, Howard Fuller. I want to thank him for his leadership, his mentorship, and all he's meant to the kids in the city of Milwaukee. So Howard, thank you. Oh, there you are, Howard, or as I call him, Father Time. So please join me in welcoming 3 MMAC board members. We're going to have a little discussion. It's my pleasure to introduce John Schlifske, who's the president and CEO of Northwestern Mutual, also the chair. Cory Nettles. Ooh, you got to wait, John. Cory Nettles, who's the founder and managing director of Generation Growth Capital, and Austin Ramirez, who's the CEO of Husco. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And let me start out with a question as I teed this up. This journey has been highly controversial, but the goal has always been to get more kids in quality schools. So John, let me start with you. You run a very large company. You've been very vocal on this topic. Why have you been involved in this, and why is it important to you in Northwestern Mutual?
I think you can boil it down to 2 or 3 reasons. First of all, I don't think you can have a strong community if you don't have an educational system where the kids that are in it have a chance to succeed at the other end of it. Northwestern Mutual's made a huge investment in the city. We have a vested interest in the quality of life here, and you can't find a great city without a great educational system. The second thing is it's our future workforce. Northwestern Mutual is somewhat unique among many companies here, and that all our employees are based in Wisconsin, except for maybe 1% that's in New York. And so we need a vibrant, source of employment. And it's just a shame that we can't rely on our own city for that. And so I think both in terms of quality of life and the need for employees, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Cory, you're obviously very involved in this. You're raising 25, 30 million. It keeps growing to set up a new charter school. Why is this so important to you?
Yeah, so every other day I hear about how Milwaukee is on a list for the worst places for African Americans in the country to be. Incarceration, education, teen pregnancy, infant mortality, et cetera. The only thing that I know, or the best way that I know to address that, is through education. My theory of change, Michelle and our theory of change, is if we've got socioeconomically disadvantaged youth, particularly Black and brown, the only way to really change the trajectory of those kids and of those families is through education. That certainly was my story as a poor kid born and raised in Milwaukee to a teen single-parent mom. And had it not been for that education, I would be another one of these statistics. So At Dr. Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy, when I'm out there as I was last week, looking in the eyes of those 320 kids, high school kids, who came from the same kind of socioeconomic conditions, I know that the only way, the best way to give those folks a chance up and out is going to be through education.
Austin, you've got a family that's deeply involved in this, but professionally, you also spend a lot of your time as chair of City Forward Collective. Why is this so important to you, and why the importance of getting parents involved in this?
Yeah, I think it's an existential threat to our business community in southeastern Wisconsin to not have a vibrant education system. And I also just think as a leader, I go around the country, and Wisconsin's on a lot of lists of greatest places to be too, and Milwaukee's on a lot of those lists. But I take it as a personal affront that our educational discrepancies are so vast, and I think we all need to take personal responsibility for that and really invest in fixing the issues here in Milwaukee. And one of the great things we've done in the last year, and I think it was a key enabler to the funding increases that we got in the recent budget, was we got the families of the students that are being served by charter and voucher schools to stand up and say, look, our kids are worth just as much as every other kid in the rest of the city. And we have now almost half the kids in Milwaukee that are attending charter and voucher schools. And unless we have those kids and their families saying, look, our kids are important, these schools are important, we need to support these schools, I think that's what enabled us to make that change.
So I talked a little bit in the opening about scholarship programs, about the thirst to make sure every kid has access to a quality school. One of the issues that plagued us for a long time is that the business community, from some perspectives, is in this to put MPS out of business. So how do you respond to the charge that the business community kind of isn't supportive of public education? I'll give you that softball, John.
I think about it in a couple ways. The first is I think having a rich ecosystem for education does not mean that you're against one school form or another. And so it just is nonsensical to me that you can be for school choice, charter, and so on, and be against MPS. You can be for all of that stuff. And what we've seen is that there's high quality, that's right. There's high quality schools in each of those ecosystems. There's one system doesn't have all the answers. And so I think you gotta view it that way. And then the final thing that I think is, Northwestern Mutual, we compete every day in the marketplace against our peer life insurance companies. We fight tooth and nail for employees, for sales, and all that. But when it comes to the key issues for our industry, we come together. We don't fight. We realize that if we're not united from an industry perspective, we won't get what we want in Washington or in the local state governments that we fight in. And so I think it's more important for all these systems to come together and advocate for the students rather than to fight for one another for their own personal gain.
Cory, same question in Austin, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with John entirely. I always say I am delivery system agnostic. And I don't care if you're district school, charter school, private school, wherever a family can decide is a good place for their kid to get an education, we ought to support. As John said, there's quality across the ecosystem. There's also some challenges across the ecosystem. And we got to be candid about that. We need to hold ourselves accountable as a community to address that. So I really don't care where mom or dad choose to send the kid so long as it's a good one. The other kind of fallacy in this is you had the chart up there, MPS 54%. If MPS went out of business tomorrow, we don't have the capacity to absorb all those kids. So this is a silly argument that we're in this to put MPS out of business. I want the superintendent of MPS, Dr. Keith Polsey, is a personal friend of mine for 25 years. Anything he calls me and asks me to do, I'm going to do, because I want him to be successful, because I want MPS to be successful. So we can't get drawn into these constant, decade-long education wars. They don't serve our kids well. They're certainly not serving our community well.
Austin, you talk a little bit about that too, and also from the perspective of just the impact that Ogden Prep has had in the neighborhood that it's in.
Yeah, I mean, impact is what it's all about, right? And I think Cory said it well, being delivery system agnostic. In our businesses, we can't afford to be ideological. We have to be pragmatic. And I think we have the same challenge when we talk about education. All that matters is what works. All that matters is getting kids into high-performing schools. And I think the funding increases that we got this last year should be transformational to our city's education system. But it also takes away the excuse that we've had for decades of the charter and voucher schools being funded at a fraction of the public schools. We've narrowed that discrepancy significantly, and now we've got to really deliver. And it's not okay to just be, better than MPS. We've got to be delivering outstanding, high-quality educations to every single student in this city.
So this is a question that 3 weeks ago I wouldn't have asked, but I'm going to ask each of you now. Despite the Supreme Court resolving this some 25 years ago, there's now a new lawsuit in front of the Supreme Court that probably most people aren't aware of. And that lawsuit calls parent choice a cancer for the public school system in Wisconsin. And with 50,000 kids in the city of Milwaukee choosing to go to an independent public charter school or a private school, can you talk about, from your perspective as you look forward, what kind of damage that would do if we lost parent choice at this point?
I think it would be the single most horrific thing that could happen to the educational system in Milwaukee. First of all, most of the kids in the non-MPS schools are disadvantaged either economically, they're people of color, they've got no choice other than what is provided to them through this kind of things we're talking about, unlike, let's say, some of the more affluent suburbs where parents have natural choices that they can make. So eliminating the choice and eliminating all these schools would then send these kids back to MPS, which also doesn't have the resources to take them. So it's sort of a nonsensical argument because there's no practical way to handle it, but it would be horrific for these kids because it would eliminate a number of high-quality schools that they would no longer have access to.
Cory, think about it from the perspective of launching a new school that you're in the middle of.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, with folks on this stage and many in the room, people who've committed more than $30 million and counting to build, to invest in these new opportunities. And again, I don't begrudge MPS anything. They don't have the ability to, as John said, to absorb all of these kids back into MPS. They don't have the facilities and the infrastructure, human capital and otherwise to do that. Not to mention the disruption and the chaos that this would cause in these families, the trauma it would cause in the families. But also you're denying the most vulnerable people in our community choice. Most of us in this room, we have choice. We get to vote with our feet. So we can move to other communities. We have the resources to put our kids into higher performing places. These families don't. And on a moral basis, it offends me that we would say that we're going to trap you in a system that is generally underperforming, and we're not going to let you make the choice that's in the best interest of your children. How is that a good thing? Yeah. So we have to do everything as we can as a community, tooth and nail, to defeat this lawsuit and to protect the rights of parents to choose the options that are best for their children. And if that's MPS, God bless them. But if it's St. Aug, God bless them. And those are the principles that we have to fight for as a community.
Yeah, we've got great schools in every sector of the educational ecosystem in Milwaukee, but a lot of the highest performing schools are in the charter and voucher segment. The idea that we're talking about shutting down some of the highest performing schools in this city is ludicrous to me. What we need to be talking about, we've got multiple schools, and again, in every sector, that are delivering 0% proficiency in reading and math to their kids. We shouldn't be talking about closing high-performing schools. We should be talking about how do we shut down low-performing schools, or at a minimum, how do we educate those parents so they can make the right decisions for their kids and get them into high-performing schools.
So let me ask you all a closing question as I think about Howard and this 35-year journey to help improve education in the city, give parents, students access to a quality education. What would you say, John and Cory and Austin, to the business leaders that are following you? Why get involved, and what does progress look like?
Well, I would urge you all to get personally involved. I have been. It's incredibly rewarding. It's one of the areas where you really feel like you can make a difference. One of my predecessors at Northwestern Mutual said the beauty of Milwaukee is it's just small enough that personal impact can have a lasting impact in the city. I think it's an imperative, as Cory and Austin talked about. So I would urge you to look at sort of the notion that we can't wait any longer on this. And I would also urge you to maybe do some deep dives on what's going on. That it is a rich ecosystem. There's so many things going on. It's not all bad. And to be able to help sort of, let's say, put more money on the bets that are the schools that are working is just going to accelerate all the positive momentum we have. So I would really encourage you with some of your extra time to find a way to get engaged in this stuff?
And I'd say, for me, education is the single most important issue of our day, the single most important issue of our yesterday, the single most important issue of our tomorrow. And we can't have successful businesses in this community if you don't have an informed citizenry who can do the work that we all need to do. And that's everything from technical, high-skilled to creative class and everything in between. So there's a lot of opportunity. If it's involvement in a school, adopt a school. All across the ecosystem, adopt a school. We have great organizations from Teach for America to All In Milwaukee to City Forward Collective. Adopt an organization. Go read to third graders. As a community, this is our most important issue. And I would hope that we would commit the largest portion of our philanthropy to education. I'm a huge fan of arts and culture. But if I don't know what Renoir and Chagall and Monet and Romare Bearden means because I've not been educated, then what do all these museums and all of these great works mean? So I encourage you, I implore you as business leaders to put your work and your shoulder to this will, because it's not possible for us to be successful as a community if we don't, through our association, do this work. And then last thing I'd say, Tim, is, you've tipped your hat at least twice to Dr. Fuller, who's well-deserved. We all owe you a huge, huge, huge debt of gratitude, because this work has happened in large part because of you.
I can't say it better than that. I just say, as business people, we have to recognize that the economic model in America does not work if we are not giving kids equal opportunity. And we are not giving kids equal opportunity in Milwaukee, and we need to fix it.
Great. So you're all generous with your time. I want to thank you for digging into this issue. I want to thank you to your commitment to all the kids in the city of Milwaukee. So let's give them a good round of applause. Thank you. All right, go enjoy your show.